Chapter 1. The blood-soaked threshold. The rain had turned the cobblestones into mirrors, reflecting nothing but darkness. Alara pressed herself against the stone wall of the alley, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. Her fingers clutched the worn leather satchel to her chest, everything she owned in the world, and everything they wanted. The men hunting her weren't thieves. Thieves would have taken the bag and left. These men wanted her silence, permanent and absolute. She'd been a fool to think she could simply disappear after what she'd witnessed in Lord Ashford's study. A fool to believe that a governess dismissed, disgraced, accused of theft she hadn't committed could vanish into London's fog without consequence. The footsteps echoed closer. 3 sets, maybe 4. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then the alley went silent, not quiet silent. The kind of silence that pressed against eardrums, that made the hair on the back of her neck stand rigid. Even the rain seemed to hesitate, drops suspended in air like held breath. A figure stood at the alley's mouth. Alara couldn't see his face, only his silhouette, tall, impossibly still, wearing a long coat that didn't move despite the wind. The men pursuing her had stopped. She could hear their breathing, ragged and suddenly uncertain. "The street is closed," the figure said. His voice was cultured, cold, and carried an accent she couldn't place. "Old money, perhaps. Old everything. We've business here," one of Ashford's men growled. "The woman's a thief. We're taking her back to face justice." No, the single word fell like a blade. "You're leaving." Like how the man's protest ended in a wet, choking sound. Alara's vision adjusted enough to see movement too fast to be natural, too fluid to be human. The figure had crossed 20 feet in the space between heartbeats. Ashford's man was against the wall now, lifted by his throat, feet dangling above the ground. "I don't repeat myself," the stranger said quietly. The other men ran. Their companion dropped to the cobblestones, gasping, then scrambled after them on hands and knees. The alley returned to silence, that wrong, pressing silence that made Alara's instincts scream run, but her legs wouldn't obey. The figure turned toward her. As he stepped into the thin light from a distant street lamp, Alara saw his face for the first time. Beautiful. The word came unbidden, and she hated herself for thinking it. He was beautiful the way ancient cathedrals were beautiful, cold stone and impossible grace, built to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. Dark hair fell across a face too pale to perfect, with cheekbones that could cut glass, and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. Those eyes fixed on her, and Alara forgot how to breathe. "You're bleeding," he observed. She touched her temple, felt the warm wetness there. One of Ashford's men had struck her before she'd run. The wound wasn't deep, but it was bleeding freely, and the stranger's gaze followed the single drop of blood that traced down her jaw. His expression didn't change, but something in his stillness shifted, became focused, hungry. "Thank you," Alara managed, though her voice shook. "For helping me. I should go." "Where?" The question stopped her. Where indeed? She had £3 to her name, no references that weren't poisoned by Ashford's lies, and nowhere in London that was safe. "I'll manage," she said, lifting her chin with a pride she didn't feel. "No," he said simply. "You won't." He moved again, that unnatural speed, and suddenly he was close enough that she could see the fine embroidery on his waistcoat, smell the strange scent that clung to him. Not cologne. Something older, like earth and stone and time itself. "Those men will return with more," he continued. "Ashford doesn't tolerate loose ends. You witness something you shouldn't have, and he'll ensure you never speak of it." Alara's blood went cold. "How do you know Lord Ashford?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I know many things, including that you have perhaps 2 hours before he sends men who won't be frightened away so easily." He paused. "I can offer you sanctuary. Why would you help me?" "Perhaps I find the idea of Ashford's cruelty distasteful." His gaze dropped to the blood on her temple again. "Or perhaps I have uses for someone in your particular position, desperate, resourceful, and in possession of dangerous knowledge." It should have terrified her. Instead, Alara felt the strange pull of recognition, as if some part of her had been waiting for this moment, this choice, this beautiful monster in the rain. "What are you?" she whispered. His smile widened, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp. "Come with me, and perhaps you'll live long enough to find out." Thunder rolled overhead. The rain began to fall in earnest, washing the blood from the cobblestones. Alara thought of the cold lodging house, the locked doors, the endless string of rejections and accusations. She thought of Ashford's men returning, of shallow graves and convenient accidents. Then she thought of those impossible eyes, and the way this stranger had moved like death itself. One condition, she said. You answer my questions honestly. Some of them, most of them. He considered her for a long moment, then extended his hand. His fingers were cool when they closed around hers, not cold exactly, but lacking the warmth of life. My name is Lucian Blackthorn, he said. And you've just made either the wisest or the most foolish decision of your mortal life. Chapter 2. The House of Shadows. The carriage waited in the darkness beyond the alley's end, black lacquer gleaming wetly under the rain. No driver sat at the reins, yet the horses stood perfectly still, their breath misting white in the cold air. They were magnificent creatures, coal-black and unnaturally calm, as if they too belonged to some other world. Lucian handed Elara inside without ceremony. The interior smelled of leather and something she couldn't name, incense, perhaps, or very old wood. The seats were velvet, deep burgundy, and when she settled against them, she felt her exhausted body sink into unexpected comfort. He entered after her, moving with that same liquid grace, and rapped once against the carriage wall. The horses began to move, though Elara had heard no command, seen no driver. Take the reins. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere Ashford's reach doesn't extend. Lucian sat across from her, his pale face half shadowed in the darkness. Blackthorn House. It's been my family's estate for longer than London has been a city. Elara watched the streets slide past the window, familiar lanes giving way to unfamiliar ones, the buildings growing older, stranger, their architecture speaking of centuries past. Gas lamps became fewer, then disappeared entirely. The carriage rolled through darkness broken only by moonlight. You're not human, she said quietly. Not a question. No, are you going to kill me? If I wanted you dead, you'd have died in the alley. He tilted his head, studying her with those unsettling eyes. You're remarkably composed for someone who's just fled into the night with a monster. I don't have the luxury of hysterics. Elara touched her temple again, felt the dried blood there. And I'm not certain yet whether you're a monster or simply something else. A flicker of surprise crossed his features. Most humans would be screaming by now. Most humans haven't spent the last 3 years watching Lord Ashford's guests arrive after dark and leave before dawn, all of them with your same pallor, your same strange stillness. She met his gaze directly. I didn't understand what I was seeing until tonight, but I've suspected for months that something unnatural happened in that house. Lucian went very still. What did you witness? A meeting. 5 men, all dressed as you are, expensively, but in styles from different eras. They spoke of territories and bloodlines and houses. She paused. And they spoke of killing someone who'd broken their laws. A woman named Catherine. The temperature in the carriage dropped. When? Lucian's voice had gone soft, dangerous. 2 nights ago. They said she'd fed without consent, that she'd endangered the covenant. Elara watched his face carefully. Ashford argued for mercy. The others voted for execution. I was bringing tea. They didn't know I was there until Ashford saw me in the doorway. And he accused you of theft to discredit you. Lucian's jaw tightened. If you spoke of what you'd heard, you'd be dismissed as a criminal, a liar. Yes. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Catherine was my cousin. She was reckless, arrogant, and she broke one of our most sacred laws. But she was family, and Ashford had no right to sit in judgment. I'm sorry, Elara said, and meant it. Don't be. She knew the consequences. He turned back to the window. But Ashford has been overstepping his authority for years. He pretends to uphold our laws while using them to eliminate rivals. The council grows tired of his ambitions. The carriage slowed, then stopped. Elara looked out and saw iron gates, tall and intricate, set into walls covered in ivy that seemed to writhe in the moonlight. Beyond them stood a house, a manor rising from the darkness like something from a Gothic novel. Stone and shadow, towers and wings, windows that reflected nothing. Blackthorn House. Last chance to run, Lucian said quietly. Once you cross this threshold, you enter a world with different rules, different dangers. Elara thought of Ashford's men, of the life she'd lost, of the truth she now carried. I crossed that threshold the moment I saw what I saw. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. The gates swung open soundlessly. The carriage rolled forward, up a long drive lined with ancient trees, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the moon. When they stopped before the manor's entrance, Lucian descended first, then offered his hand. His touch was still, Cool, still lacking that vital warmth, but Alara took it anyway. The door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, silver-haired, elegant, wearing a gown that belonged in a museum. Her eyes were the same reflective quality as Lucian's, her skin the same impossible pallor. "You brought a mortal home," the woman observed, her voice carrying a faint accent. "French," Alara thought. "Very old French." "I brought a witness," Lucian corrected. "Alara, this is Marguerite. It's complicated. Say aunt for simplicity." "A witness to what?" Marguerite's gaze fixed on Alara, sharp and assessing. "Ashford's continued violations of the covenant." Lucian guided Alara inside, into an entrance hall that took her breath away. Marble floors, sweeping staircases, portraits that seemed to watch them pass. Candles everywhere, no gas lamps, no modern lighting, just hundreds of candles casting dancing shadows across walls. "And she's bleeding," Marguerite said, her nostrils flaring slightly. "Lucian, you can't bring wounded mortals into a house full of—" "I'm aware." His voice held a warning. "Prepare the East Wing. She'll need a room, fresh clothing, and food. Human food." "You're taking responsibility for her?" "Yes." Something passed between them, some silent understanding that Alara couldn't interpret. Finally, Marguerite nodded. "Follow me, child," she said to Alara, her tone softening slightly. "Let's get you cleaned up, and tomorrow, you'll learn exactly what kind of world you've stumbled into." As Alara followed the older woman up the grand staircase, she glanced back once. Lucian stood in the entrance hall, watching her ascend, his expression unreadable. She had the distinct feeling she'd just sealed some bargain she didn't yet understand. Chapter 3. The unspoken rule. The room Marguerite led her to belonged in a fairy tale, the dark kind, where beauty and danger intertwined. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in heavy velvet curtains the color of midnight. Candles flickered in silver sconces, casting warm light across walls papered in deep crimson damask. A fire burned in the hearth, though Alara hadn't seen anyone light it. "The washroom is through there," Marguerite said, gesturing to a door. "I'll have clothes brought up. Burn what you're wearing, it reeks of fear and blood." Alara touched her temple self-consciously. "I didn't realize the smell was so strong." "It wouldn't be. Not to you." Marguerite's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "But to us, blood sings. Especially blood mixed with adrenaline, with terror. It's intoxicating." The admission should have terrified her. Instead, Alara found herself curious. "Does it make it difficult, being near me? I'm 400 years old, child. I learned control before your great-great-grandmother was born." Marguerite moved to the window, drew back the heavy curtains to reveal darkness beyond. "But there are others in this house who are younger, hungrier. Stay in this wing. Don't wander the halls after dark." "After dark? Isn't it already?" Alara stopped. "You mean after midnight?" "I mean after the household wakes." Marguerite's smile was sharp. "We sleep during the day, most of us. The old ones, like Lucian, can tolerate dawn and dusk, but true daylight burns. After midnight, when we're all awake and hunting." She paused. "It would be wise to keep to your room." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young woman entered. Mortal, Alara noted with relief, seeing the flush in her cheeks, the warmth in her movements. She carried an armful of clothing and a tray laden with food. "Clara helps maintain the house," Marguerite explained. "She and 3 others. They're paid well for their discretion and their willingness to work unusual hours." Clara set down her burdens and offered Alara a shy smile. "If you need anything, miss, just ring the bell. I'll hear it." After they left, Alara stood alone in the opulent room, trembling slightly. The reality of her situation was beginning to settle like frost on her bones. She was in a house full of vampires. She could admit the word now, here in private. Creatures that drank blood, that died in sunlight, that had lived for centuries, and she'd willingly entered their domain. The washroom was as luxurious as the bedroom, with a deep copper tub and modern plumbing that surprised her. Alara scrubbed away the blood, the grime, the last remnants of her old life. When she emerged, she found the clothes Clara had brought, a simple dress in dark green silk, far finer than anything she'd owned even before her disgrace. The food was plain, but well prepared. Bread, cheese, cold chicken, wine. She ate mechanically, her mind racing. What had Lucian meant by taking responsibility for her? What exactly was the covenant these vampires followed? And what would they expect from her in return for sanctuary? She was still picking at the bread when another knock came. "Enter," she called. Expecting Clara, Lucien stepped inside instead. Alara rose quickly, suddenly conscious of her bare feet, her loose hair, the intimacy of receiving him in her bedchamber. But he seemed unconcerned, closing the door behind him and regarding her with those unsettling eyes. "You should be resting," he said. "I'm not tired." She gestured helplessly. "I don't know what I am." Overwhelmed, frightened, trying desperately to appear neither. He moved to the window, keeping distance between them. "I won't insult you by pretending this is safe. It isn't. You're mortal, bleeding, and surrounded by predators. Then why bring me here?" "Because the alternative was watching Ashford's men drag you into an alley and silence you permanently." His voice remained calm, but something flickered behind his eyes. "And because you know too much to be released. But you strike me as someone who might be trusted with more." Alara sat on the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak. "You want something from me." "I want testimony. You witnessed Ashford's council meeting, you heard them condemn Catherine. If I can prove he's been manipulating the covenant for personal gain, I can have him removed from the London Council." Lucien turned to face her. "But mortals don't testify before vampire courts. You'd need protection, sponsorship. A house willing to vouch for you. Your house, yes, and in return, you'd be under my protection. No vampire in London could touch you without declaring war on Blackthorn." He paused. "But you'd also be bound to this house, to our rules, to our world. You couldn't leave freely. You couldn't return to mortal society. The knowledge you carry is too dangerous." The cage was prettier than Ashford's accusations, but it was still a cage. "What if I refuse?" Alara asked quietly. Lucien's expression didn't change. "Then I'd have to ensure your silence another way. We don't kill mortals lightly, but we also don't risk exposure. You'd be given a choice: have your memories of the last week removed, or..." He left the alternative unspoken. "That's not really a choice at all." "No," he agreed. "It isn't, but I'm giving you one anyway. Stay here, help me expose Ashford's corruption, and live under my protection. Or forget everything, and return to a mortal life, diminished, but free." Alara thought of Catherine, executed for breaking their laws. She thought of Ashford's cold smile, his willingness to destroy her reputation to cover his secrets. She thought of the world she'd glimpsed tonight, ancient, powerful, operating in shadows beneath the city she knew. "I want to know what happened to Catherine," she said finally. "The truth, not politics." Something crossed Lucien's face, surprise perhaps, or pain quickly masked. "She fed from a mortal without consent. The woman died. It's our most sacred law, never take a life through feeding unless the mortal offers it willingly." Did Catherine know the woman would die? Does it matter? Yes. He studied her for a long moment. No, Catherine was young, barely a century turned. She miscalculated, drained too much. It was recklessness, not malice, and they killed her for it. They killed her to maintain the covenant. "Without our laws, we'd be monsters." "You're already monsters," Alara said softly. "The question is whether you're monsters with honor." Lucien's laugh was bitter, unexpected. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "I've been called both." She met his gaze. "I'll stay. I'll testify. But I want your word, your actual word, not just pretty promises that you won't harm me, won't force me, won't treat me as property. You have it. Say it properly." His eyes gleamed. "I, Lucien Blackthorn, give you my word that while you reside under my protection, I will not harm you, force you, or treat you as property. You will be guest and ally, not prisoner or prey." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with something Alara didn't understand, some significance beyond their meaning. "Then I accept," she whispered. Outside, church bells tolled midnight, and somewhere in the house below, she heard movement beginning, the household waking for the night. Chapter 4. Threads of dawn. Alara woke to darkness so complete she thought she'd gone blind. Panic seized her for a heartbeat before memory returned, the heavy velvet curtains, the windowless inner wall, the vampire house that slept through daylight. She fumbled for the candle beside her bed, found matches, and coaxed flame into being. The clock on the mantel read 2:30. Afternoon, she assumed, though in this house time felt meaningless. She dressed in another gown. Clara had left this one, a deep burgundy that made her pale skin look ghostly. When she ventured into the hallway, she found it empty, silent as a tomb. Every door stood closed, and she remembered Marguerite's warning about the household sleeping. They were all around her, she realized. Behind these doors, in these rooms, lying perfectly still in their death-like sleep. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, She felt a strange calm, as if she'd stepped outside normal fear into something else entirely. The house revealed itself differently by daylight. She found a library that made her breath catch, 3 stories of books, ladders on rails, windows covered by thick shutters, a music room with instruments from different centuries, a portrait gallery where pale faces watched her pass, their eyes following with painted intensity. In one portrait, she recognized Lucien. He looked younger somehow, though his face was unchanged. The clothing dated the painting to perhaps a century ago, maybe more. Beside him stood a woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, her hand resting on his shoulder. His sister, Clara said behind her, making Alara jump. "Sorry, miss. Didn't mean to startle you. I didn't hear you approach." Alara's heart raced. His sister? Genevieve. She died in 1823. Vampire hunters. Clara's expression turned sad. "Mr. Blackthorn doesn't speak of her, but Mrs. Marguerite says he was different before, warmer." Alara studied the painted face again, trying to imagine Lucien warm, open, unguarded. The image wouldn't form. "I've prepared tea in the morning room," Clara continued. "It's lonely, isn't it? Being awake while they sleep. I felt it too, my first weeks here." The morning room faced east, its windows uncovered now that the sun had moved beyond them. Real daylight, weak and gray through London's perpetual fog, but daylight nonetheless. Alara sank into a chair and accepted the tea gratefully. "How long have you worked here?" she asked. 3 years. My father owed Mr. Blackthorn a debt, saved his life once, though he never told me details. When Papa died, Mr. Blackthorn offered me work, good wages, safe housing." Clara poured her own cup. "He's not cruel, miss. Strict about rules, yes, but fair. And he protects his people, mortal and vampire both. You're not afraid of them?" "I was at first. Now." Clara smiled slightly. "They're dangerous, true enough. But so's London. So's poverty. At least here, I know exactly what the dangers are." They talked through the afternoon, Clara explaining the household's rhythms, the unspoken rules, the careful dance of mortal servants and immortal masters. No garlic. That was myth. Crosses didn't harm them unless wielded by someone of genuine faith, and even then it was more discomfort than danger. Silver burned, but only pure silver, and only direct contact. "And the feeding?" Alara asked quietly. Clara's cheeks colored. "They have arrangements. Willing mortals who come for that purpose. Mr. Blackthorn is particular about consent. Very particular. After what happened to his sister, he doesn't tolerate carelessness. Vampire hunters killed her, you said. Not feeding accidents, but she died protecting a mortal servant who'd been caught in the crossfire. Mr. Blackthorn blames himself for not being there, for not protecting her better." Clara set down her cup. "That's why he brought you here, I think. He sees another mortal in danger, and he can't. He won't let it happen again." The information settled into Alara's understanding of him, adding depth to the cold, controlled creature who'd rescued her. Not just political maneuvering then. Something personal drove him as well. As twilight approached, Clara excused herself to prepare the household for waking. Alara remained in the morning room, watching the last light fade from the windows. She felt the change before she heard it, a shift in the air, a sense of presence stirring throughout the house. They were waking, footsteps in distant corridors, voices, low and musical, the house coming alive in reverse. Creatures of night beginning their day as mortals prepared for sleep. Lucien appeared in the doorway as full darkness fell. He looked different, somehow more present, more vital. His color seemed better, though perhaps that was just her imagination. He'd changed clothes, now wearing simpler attire, dark trousers, white shirt, waistcoat, almost modern, except for the old-fashioned cut. "You didn't stay in your room," he observed. "Clara showed me the house. I hope that's acceptable. It's sensible. You should know the layout, the exits." He moved into the room with that liquid grace. "How do you feel?" "Strange, displaced, like I've fallen into a novel." Alara met his gaze. "When do we begin?" "The testimony? The case against Ashford?" "Eager to be useful? Eager to understand what I've gotten myself into." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Tonight you'll meet the household. Tomorrow, we begin preparing your testimony. But first," he gestured to the door. "Come, there's something you need to see." She followed him through the house, down corridors that grew older, more ancient. The architecture changed, became medieval, then older still. Finally, They descended a stone staircase into what could only be called catacombs. Where are we going? Elara asked, her voice echoing. To show you why the covenant exists. Why, our laws matter. Lucian stopped before an iron door, ancient and heavy. And to show you what I am, truly. Before you commit yourself further, he opened the door. Beyond lay a chamber carved from living rock, and in its center, illuminated by torches that burned with strange blue flame, stood a monument. Names covered every surface, thousands of them, carved in dozens of languages spanning centuries, every mortal killed by vampire feeding in the last 500 years, Lucian said quietly. We keep the accounting. We remember the cost of our existence. Elara stepped closer, reading names at random. Sarah Miller, 1654. Thomas Chen, 1789. Catherine's victim was there too, freshly carved, Emma Whitmore. 1867. This is what we are, Lucian continued, his voice rough. This is the price of immortality. And the covenant exists to ensure this list grows as slowly as possible. He turned to face her, and in the blue torchlight, his eyes seemed to burn. So I ask you again, Elara, knowing this, seeing this, do you still want to help me preserve these laws? Chapter 5. The council gathers. Elara stood before the monument of names, her throat tight. The blue flames cast dancing shadows across the carved letters, making them seem to move, to breathe, to whisper accusations into the cold air. Yes, she said finally. More than ever. Lucian's eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine surprise she'd seen from him. Why? Because someone is counting. Someone is remembering. She traced her fingers across Emma Whitmore's name. In the mortal world, women like Emma disappear every day. Poor women, servant women, women no one bothers to remember. But here, she turned to face him. Here, her name is carved in stone. Here, her death mattered enough to kill for. Justice, that's a generous interpretation. Maybe, or maybe I've spent too long watching the powerful destroy the powerless without consequence. Elara's voice hardened. If your laws can hold even monsters accountable, then yes, they're worth preserving. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that cold control, revealing warmth beneath. You continue to surprise me. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. He laughed, sudden and genuine, and the sound transformed him. For a moment, she glimpsed the man in the portrait beside his sister and guarded, almost human. Then footsteps echoed on the stairs behind them, and the warmth vanished. Lucian, Marguerite descended into the chamber, her silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. Behind her came 3 others, 2 men and a woman, all carrying that same predatory stillness. The household is assembled. They're waiting to meet your guest. The way she said guest suggested other words she might have chosen. Of course, Lucian offered Elara his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. Stay close. Some of my people are curious about mortals. The great hall was something from a medieval castle, vaulted ceilings, stone walls hung with ancient tapestries, a massive fireplace where flames roared. Long tables had been arranged, and at them sat perhaps 30 vampires in various states of dress. From modern evening wear to clothing centuries out of date, every eye fixed on Elara as she entered. The silence was absolute. She felt their attention like weight, like pressure against her skin. Some gazes held curiosity, others hunger. A few watched with calculation that made her think of Ashford. This is Elara Grey, Lucian announced, his voice carrying easily through the hall. She is under my direct protection, bound by my word. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally. A ripple of reaction moved through the assembled vampires' whispers. Exchanged glances. A mortal guest, one of them said. A young man with auburn hair and an Irish accent. How novel. Should we dust off the fine china then? Nervous laughter followed. She's a witness, Lucian continued, ignoring the mockery, to crimes committed by one of the council members. Crimes that violate the covenant. The laughter died. Ashford, Marguerite said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Elara witnessed the tribunal that condemned Catherine. She heard Ashford manipulate the proceedings, twist the law to his advantage. Lucian's hand tightened slightly on Elara's arm. With her testimony, we can prove his corruption. An older vampire stood, a man who looked perhaps 50 in mortal years, with gray-streaked hair and cold eyes. Mortals don't testify before the council. It's never been done. Then perhaps it's time our laws evolved, Lucian replied smoothly. We claim to be civilized, to be better than mindless predators. Surely we can hear truth regardless of its source, or perhaps, the gray-haired vampire countered, you're using this mortal as a pawn in your vendetta against Ashford. He sat in judgment of your cousin. You want revenge, so you've manufactured a witness. I manufactured nothing. Elara came to me fleeing Ashford's assassins. Her testimony exists, whether I use it or not, then let her speak now. The vampire turned his cold gaze on Elara. Tell us, mortal, what exactly did you hear? Elara felt 30 pairs of predatory eyes fix on her. Her mouth went dry. This wasn't the formal testimony Lucian had promised to prepare her for. This was an ambush, a test, but she'd survived 3 years under Ashford's roof. She knew how to navigate dangerous men. I heard 5 members of your council debate whether Catherine Blackthorne deserved mercy, she said, keeping her voice steady. Lord Ashford argued that the covenant allowed for consideration of intent, that Catherine's youth and inexperience should be weighed against her crime. The others disagreed. But Ashford wasn't arguing for justice, he was performing for an audience he didn't know existed. How do you know? The gray-haired vampire demanded, because after the vote, when the others had left, he laughed. Elara's voice turned cold with memory. He told his steward that Catherine's execution would wound Lucian Blackthorne's pride, make him less effective on the council. He said, let Lucian mourn his reckless whelp, while I consolidate the London territories. Silence fell like a stone. You see? Lucian said quietly. He used the covenant as a weapon. Catherine broke the law. Yes, she deserved punishment. But Ashford ensured that punishment was death because it served his political ambitions. If this is true, the gray-haired vampire began. It is, Elara interrupted. I have no reason to lie. I lost everything because Ashford discovered I'd overheard. My position, my reputation, nearly my life. I gained nothing from falsehood. Another vampire stood, the woman who'd come with Marguerite, dark-skinned and beautiful, wearing modern evening dress. Even if we believe her, the council won't accept mortal testimony. Ashford will claim she's been enthralled, that Lucian has compromised her will. Then we'll need proof beyond testimony, Lucian said. Records, witnesses, evidence of his other manipulations. This is merely the beginning. It's a declaration of war, Marguerite said flatly. Ashford controls half the London Council. If you accuse him publicly, he'll move against you, against all of us. Let him. Lucian's voice turned hard. He's been consolidating power for decades while the rest of us pretended not to notice. Catherine's death was simply the first time his ambition touched my house directly. The Irish vampire laughed, sharp and bitter. So the old lion finally decides to bare his teeth. About bloody time, Blackthorne. Others nodded, murmured agreement. Elara realized with surprise that many of these vampires had been waiting for Lucian to act. That his grief over Catherine had somehow been the catalyst they needed. We'll need to move carefully, the dark-skinned woman said. Gather evidence, build alliances. If we strike and fail, Ashford will use it as justification to eliminate every house that opposed him. Then we don't fail, Lucian replied simply. The meeting dissolved into planning territories, loyalties, which council members might be swayed. Elara listened, learning the Byzantine politics of vampire London, understanding for the first time just how deep these waters ran. When Lucian finally guided her from the hall, hours had passed. Dawn would come soon. You did well, he said, as they climbed the stairs. Better than I'd hoped. They were testing me, of course. And you passed. He paused outside her chamber door. Sleep now. Tomorrow night, the real work begins. But as Elara lay in her bed, watching candlelight dance across the ceiling, she wondered what she'd truly committed herself to. Not just testimony, but war. Not just sanctuary, but sides in a conflict centuries old. And somewhere in the darkness, Ashford was learning of her survival, planning his response. Chapter 6. Blood and Borders 3. Nights passed in careful preparation. Elara spent her waking hours learning vampire law from dusty tomes in the library, memorizing the intricate hierarchy of houses and territories, understanding the delicate web of alliances that held vampire society together. Marguerite tutored her in council protocol, teaching her how to address immortals of different ranks, which questions would be permitted, and which would earn death for insolence. The council is ancient, Marguerite explained, her fingers tracing a family tree that sprawled across 6 centuries, older than any mortal government. They won't tolerate disrespect from a human, regardless of Lucian's protection, but they'll tolerate corruption from one of their own. They'll tolerate carefully hidden corruption. Ashford's mistake was being witnessed. The older vampire's smile was sharp. You represent something unprecedented, mortal eyes seeing vampire justice. It makes them nervous. By the fourth night, Alara's head swam with information. She was reviewing her notes when a commotion erupted downstairs, raised voices, the sound of something shattering. She found Lucien in the entrance hall, facing a vampire she didn't recognize. The stranger was young-looking, barely more than 20 in appearance, with wild dark hair and eyes that burned with rage. Blood stained his shirt. You should have warned me, the young vampire snarled. Ashford's people came at sunset. They torched the warehouse, killed Marcus and Teresa. I barely escaped. Simon, Lucien's voice was deadly calm. Start from the beginning. There's nothing to tell. They knew exactly where to strike, exactly when we'd be weakest. Someone told them. Simon's gaze swept the hall and landed on Alara. Or perhaps your pet mortal isn't as innocent as she claims. Alara's blood went cold. Choose your next words carefully. Lucien said, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. She appears fleeing Ashford, carrying convenient testimony. And suddenly his forces start picking off your allies? You can't be that blind, Lucien. I can be that certain. Lucien moved between Simon and Alara, a wall of predatory protection. She's been here under watch every moment. She's sent no messages, had no contact with the outside world. Then how? Because Ashford isn't a fool, Marguerite interrupted, descending the stairs. The moment Lucien sheltered her, he knew a challenge was coming. He's simply striking first, eliminating Lucien's support before the council convenes. Simon's shoulders sagged, rage giving way to grief. Marcus was 200 years old. Teresa was my sister. They're just gone. Alara watched Lucien's expression, saw something flicker there, some old pain resurfacing. He gripped Simon's shoulder with unexpected gentleness. I know, he said quietly. Believe me, I know. But their deaths won't be meaningless. We'll make Ashford answer for every law he's broken, every life he's taken. Pretty words won't bring them back, no? But justice might prevent the next deaths. Lucien turned to Marguerite. Send word to the other houses. Everyone goes to ground until the council meets. No one moves alone. No one takes unnecessary risks. As Marguerite left to carry out his orders, Simon's gaze found Alara again. You'd better be worth it, mortal. Worth Marcus. Worth Teresa. Worth the war you've started. He vanished into the night before she could respond. Alara stood frozen, the weight of those words crushing. Two vampires dead, ancient creatures who'd survived centuries, ended because she'd witnessed something she shouldn't have. Because Lucien had chosen to protect her. It's not your fault, Lucien said, reading her expression, isn't it? No, Ashford made these choices. He chose corruption, chose murder, chose escalation. He guided her toward the library, away from the other vampires who'd gathered at the commotion. You're simply the catalyst that forced everything into the open, a catalyst that got people killed. People were always going to die. That's what war is. He poured brandy from a crystal decanter, handed her a glass. I'm sorry you're seeing this side of our world so quickly. Alara drank, felt the burn. Tell me about your sister. He went very still. Why? Because I need to understand. Clara said she died protecting Immortal. That you blame yourself. She met his eyes. Is that why you saved me? Because I'm some sort of replacement? Some way to assuage your guilt? You are remarkably direct. I'm tired of pretty lies. If I'm going to be the reason people die, I deserve the truth. Lucien was silent for a long moment, staring into his glass. When he spoke, his voice was rough with memory. Genevieve was everything I wasn't: warm, impulsive, passionate about mortal culture. She loved their art, their music, their capacity for hope, despite their brief lives. He smiled sadly. She took a mortal lover, a poet named James. I warned her it was dangerous, that the other houses would see it as weakness. She didn't care. What happened? Vampire hunters found out. They came for her during the day, when she was vulnerable. James tried to defend her, bought her time to escape. She could have run, could have saved herself. His jaw tightened. Instead, she went back for him. They both died in the fire. I'm sorry. I was in Vienna when it happened. By the time I returned, they were ash. He drained his glass. So, yes, perhaps saving you is partly about Genevieve. Partly about proving I can protect someone when it matters. But you're not her replacement, Alara. He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. I'm what? She pressed. Dangerous, he said finally. to my carefully maintained control, to my political calculations, to the walls I've built around anything resembling attachment. His eyes met hers, and she saw something raw there, something vulnerable. You make me remember what it was like before I became this cold thing. And I'm not certain whether to thank you or send you away before you do more damage. The admission hung between them, weighted with meaning Alara didn't dare examine too closely. She could feel the pull between them, not just attraction, though that was there, humming beneath every interaction. Something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. Two wounded creatures finding unexpected understanding. I won't break you, she said softly. No, but you might remind me what it feels like to care whether I'm broken. He set down his glass with careful precision. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we receive word on when the council will convene. Once that happens, events will move quickly. He left before she could respond. His departure so swift she barely saw him move. Alara stood alone in the library, surrounded by centuries of vampire history, and realized with sudden clarity that she was falling into something far more dangerous than political intrigue. She was beginning to care about the monster who'd saved her. Chapter 7. When Wall's Shatterth attack came 2 nights later. Just after midnight, Alara woke to the sound of breaking glass and screams, not mortal screams, but something else entirely, high-pitched and inhuman. She stumbled from bed, heart hammering, and threw open her door. The hallway was chaos. Smoke billowed from somewhere below, acrid and chemical. Clara ran past, her face pale with terror, shouting something Alara couldn't make out over the din. Then Lucien was there, appearing with that impossible speed. His shirt was torn, blood spattering his chest, whether his own or someone else's she couldn't tell. Stay in your room, he commanded. Bar the door, and don't open it for anyone but me. What's happening? Ashford sent hunters. Professional ones. His eyes blazed with fury. They know the house layout. Someone gave them intelligence. Before Alara could respond, an explosion rocked the eastern wing. The floor shuddered beneath her feet, and somewhere distant timber crashed. Go. Lucien shoved her back toward her chamber. Now. But as she turned, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway, a man in dark clothing, carrying a crossbow loaded with a bolt that gleamed silver in the candlelight. He raised the weapon, aimed it at Lucien's back. Alara didn't think. She grabbed the heavy candelabra from the hall table and hurled it with all her strength. It struck the hunter's shoulder, spoiling his aim. The bolt flew wide, embedding itself in the wall with a thunk. The hunter spun toward her, fury twisting his features, and raised the crossbow again. This time, the bolt was meant for her. Lucien moved like liquid shadow. One moment the hunter was standing, the next he was against the wall, Lucien's hand around his throat. The crossbow clattered to the floor. Who sent you? Lucien's voice was soft, deadly. The hunter spat blood. Go to hell, leech. I've been there. It's rather boring. Lucien's grip tightened. Last chance. Who gave you the house plans? Wouldn't you? The hunter's words ended in a choking sound as Lucien squeezed. Not enough to kill, but enough to make breathing impossible. Lucien. Marguerite appeared, her silver hair disheveled, her gown torn. We've pushed them back, but there are more coming. We need to evacuate. The safe room, Lucien said, releasing the hunter, who crumpled unconscious to the floor. Get everyone to the catacombs. Now. Marguerite's gaze flicked to Alara. Her too? Especially her. They came for her, the rest was just noise. Alara's stomach dropped. Me? Dead. You can't testify. Dead. I have no reason to challenge Ashford. Lucien gripped her shoulders. They're not here to fight vampires. They're here to eliminate one mortal woman and make it look like collateral damage. Another explosion shook the house. Closer this time. The smell of burning wood grew stronger. Move, Lucien ordered. They ran through smoke-filled corridors, past rooms where furniture burned, where tapestries centuries old curled into ash. Alara glimpsed other vampires fighting, Simon grappling with a hunter twice his size. The dark-skinned woman from the council meeting moving with brutal efficiency through 3 opponents at once. They reached the stairs to the catacombs, just as the entrance hall's ceiling collapsed. Timber and stone crashed down, sending up clouds of dust and smoke. The stairway held, but the way back was blocked. Trapped, Alara realized. They were trapped underground. Perfect, Marguerite said grimly. If they seal us in, we're entombed until we starve. They won't have time. Lucien urged them down the stairs. The fire will spread. They'll have to retreat or burn with the house. The catacombs were already crowded with vampires, some wounded, all furious. Nearly 40 of them, pressed into the ancient chamber where the monument of names stood. The blue flames still burned, casting eerie light across faces twisted with rage and fear. How did they know? Someone demanded. How did mortals penetrate a vampire house's defenses? Treachery? Another spat. Someone sold us out. Arguments erupted. Accusations flew. Ilara pressed herself against the wall, trying to be invisible, but she felt their gazes landing on her again and again. The mortal, the outsider, the cause of all this destruction. Enough. Lucien's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. We survived. The hunters didn't. That's what matters. Your house is burning, the gray-haired vampire from before said coldly. Centuries of history, turning to ash. And for what? For her? He pointed at Ilara. For one mortal's testimony that may not even be accepted? For justice, Lucien replied. Or have we abandoned that principle along with our humanity? Justice? Simon laughed bitterly, pressing a hand to a wound in his side. Marcus and Teresa got justice. Very permanent justice. How many more of us have to die for your principles? The crowd murmured agreement. Ilara felt the tide turning, felt their collective anger finding focus. They needed someone to blame, and she was conveniently mortal, fragile other. She saved my life tonight, Lucien said quietly. That hunter would have put a silver bolt through my spine if Ilara hadn't intervened. Silence fell. A mortal? Marguerite's eyebrows rose. She attacked a vampire hunter? Voluntarily? I didn't think, Ilara said, finding her voice. He was going to shoot Lucien. I just reacted. Why? The gray-haired vampire demanded. What's a vampire's life to you? Ilara met his cold gaze. Everything I have. Everything I am now. Lucien gave me sanctuary when I had nothing. Protected me when I was hunted. Offered me purpose when my life had been destroyed. She straightened, refusing to show fear. Maybe to you, one mortal is expendable. But to me, one vampire, this vampire matters. The silence stretched. Then Simon laughed, the sound harsh but genuine. Well damn. She's got more spine than half of us. Others nodded, murmured reluctant agreement. The tension eased. Fractionally, Lucien's expression remained controlled, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or gratitude. He turned back to the assembled vampires. We hold this position until the fire burns out. Then we assess damage and plan our next move. His voice hardened. Ashford has declared war. Now we respond in kind. Above them, the house groaned and burned. Around them, immortals nursed wounds and plotted vengeance. And between Ilara and Lucien, something shifted, a recognition of debt, of trust given and returned, of two people bound together by more than convenience now. She'd saved his life. In the vampire world, that meant something. She just wasn't sure yet what price that salvation might demand. Chapter 8. Ashes and Aftermath. Dawn came slowly, filtered through smoke and ruins. When they finally emerged from the catacombs, Blackthorn House was a skeleton. The eastern wing had collapsed entirely, leaving only blackened timber and crumbling stone. The great hall's roof was gone, open to gray morning sky. Centuries of history reduced to ash in a single night. Ilara stood in what had been the entrance hall, her throat tight. The portraits were gone. Lucien's sister, all those pale faces watching through time, consumed by fire. The tapestries, the books, the carefully preserved fragments of vampire immortality, all destroyed. I'm sorry, she whispered. Lucien stood beside her, his face expressionless as he surveyed the damage. It's stone and wood. It can be rebuilt. But the things inside were already ghosts. He turned away from the ruins. Genevieve's portrait burned the night she died. I had it remade from memory. It was never really her, just paint pretending. His voice was carefully neutral, but Ilara heard the pain beneath. Everything can be replaced except the people we lose. And I lost her long before last night. Marguerite approached, sustained, but unbowed. The hunters' bodies, 7 in total, all professionals, well-equipped. Someone paid a fortune for this attack. Ashford's fortune, Simon added, limping over with a makeshift bandage around his ribs. Has to be, probably. Lucien's jaw tightened. But we need proof. Bodies and assumptions won't sway the council. Then we find proof, the dark-skinned vampire said. Her name was Adana. Ilara had learned, one of Lucien's oldest allies. Search the bodies. One of them might have carried orders, payment records, something traceable. As the vampires dispersed to search, Lucian turned to Alara. You should rest. Dawn is here, you're safe for the day. Where will you sleep? Your chambers were in the eastern wing. I'll manage. I've slept in worse places. He paused. Thank you. For last night. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Alara met his gaze steadily. You think I could just watch someone kill you? Even if you are. She gestured vaguely. Whatever you are? A monster, he supplied. A person who matters to me. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest. Lucian went very still. In the gray morning light, his pale face looked almost human, tired, vulnerable, real. Alara, don't. She stepped back, suddenly aware of the intimacy between them, the way everyone else had conveniently disappeared. Don't tell me all the reasons this is foolish. I know them. You're immortal. I'm not. You're dangerous. I'm fragile. You drink blood. I'd prefer to keep mine inside my veins. She laughed shakily. Believe me, I've cataloged every rational objection. And yet you're the first person in years who's treated me like I matter. Not as a servant, not as a scandal, not as a convenient witness. As someone worth saving, worth protecting, she stopped, not quite ready to finish that thought. Worth caring about, Lucian finished softly. He moved closer, slow enough that she could retreat if she wanted. You're right. This is foolish, dangerous, complicated beyond measure. But I find I don't care as much as I should. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently brushed soot from her cheek. His fingers were cool, but not cold, careful with her fragility. You terrify me, Alara Gray, not because you're weak, but because you make me want things I abandoned when Genevieve died. What things? Connection, trust, something beyond political alliances and blood oaths. His thumb traced her jawline, feather light. You make me remember what it felt like to be alive. Alara's breath caught. She could feel the danger here, the precipice they were approaching. One step further, and they'd fall into something that couldn't be undone. Lucian. Marguerite's voice shattered the moment. You need to see this. He stepped back immediately, that mask of control slamming down. But his eyes held hers for one more heartbeat, promising continuation. Before he turned away, Alara followed, her heart still racing. They found Marguerite in the ruined library, standing over a hunter's body. The man's coat had burned partially away, revealing an inner pocket. Inside was a letter, scorched at the edges, but readable. Lucian read it aloud. Eliminate the mortal witness. Make it appear accidental. If Blackthorn interferes, casualties are acceptable. Payment on completion £3,000. It's signed with Ashford's seal. Finally, Simon breathed. Proof. Written orders for murder, Adana said. The council can't ignore this. But Lucian's expression remained troubled. It's too easy. Ashford wouldn't be this careless. Maybe he didn't expect any hunters to die, Marguerite suggested. Maybe he assumed they'd succeed and recover the letter. Or maybe, Alara said slowly, he wanted you to find it. Everyone turned to stare at her. Think about it, she continued, warming to the theory. You call a council meeting based on my testimony circumstantial, easily dismissed. But if you present this letter, you're accusing a council member of hiring mortal hunters to attack a vampire house. That's not just corruption. That's the highest crime under your covenant. So Ashford would be executed, Simon said. Where's the trap? The trap is that you've escalated beyond testimony. You've made this about life and death, not just political maneuvering. Alara looked at Lucian. The council won't be able to ignore it. Yes, but they also won't be able to show mercy or find middle ground. Someone has to die, either Ashford or you, for making false accusations. Lucian's eyes widened fractionally. All or nothing. Exactly. And if he can prove the letter is forged, or create enough doubt about its authenticity, she didn't need to finish, then I'm the one who attacked him with fabricated evidence. And the council will execute me to preserve unity. Lucian studied the letter with new wariness. She's right. This is a trap disguised as evidence. So what do we do? Adana asked. We spring it anyway, Lucian said grimly. But we make sure we have enough real evidence that when the letter's authenticity is challenged, it doesn't matter. We need witnesses, financial records, other victims of Ashford's manipulations. That will take time we don't have, Marguerite warned. The council convenes in 3 nights, then we work fast. Lucian's gaze swept his assembled allies. Split up, follow every lead. And someone find out who sold us out because someone told those hunters exactly where and when to strike. As the others dispersed to their tasks, Alara touched Lucian's arm. Will you feed today? You're wounded. He glanced down at the cuts across his chest, already healing, but still visible. I have reserves. That's not what I asked. Feeding requires intimacy, trust. In my state, I might take too much. His voice dropped. I won't risk that with you. I wasn't offering, but her pulse jumped at the thought, at the forbidden intimacy of it. I meant, don't you have those willing donors Clara mentioned? Most fled during the attack. The ones remaining are terrified. He smiled tiredly. Don't worry about me, Alara. I've survived worse than a few burns and cuts. But as he walked away to begin coordinating their investigation, Alara saw him stumble slightly, saw the cost of the night's violence catching up to him. 3 nights until the council. 3 nights to find proof. 3 nights before Ashford's trap closed around them all. Chapter 9. Nights of Truth. Second night brought revelations. Adana returned with financial records stolen from one of Ashford's banking houses, payments to known hunters, bribes to council members, transactions that painted a clear picture of systematic corruption spanning decades. Simon found 3 other vampires willing to testify about Ashford's manipulation of territorial disputes, his use of the Covenant as a weapon against rivals. But it was Marguerite who uncovered the darkest truth. She arrived just after midnight, her expression grim, carrying a leather journal bound in human skin, a vampire custom that made Ilara's stomach turn. Catherine's diary, Marguerite announced, placing it on the makeshift table they'd set up in the one intact room. I found it hidden in the remains of her chambers. She knew what was coming. Lucian took the journal with careful hands, his face unreadable. But Alara saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers trembled slightly before he controlled them. He read aloud, Ashford came to me 3 nights ago. He offered me a choice: pledge my house's vote to his territorial expansion, or face consequences. I refused. He smiled and said the Covenant had ways of dealing with those who couldn't be persuaded. Lucian's voice grew rough. The next evening, I met Marcus at the tavern. He was kind, warm, willing. I fed carefully, as I'd been taught. But when I woke, he was dead, drained completely. I swear I only took what was safe, what was offered. But the evidence says otherwise. She was set up, Simon breathed. Ashford arranged it. There's more. Lucian continued reading. I know what's coming. The council will convene. Ashford will argue for mercy while ensuring they vote for death. He needs me gone, my house's territories, my alliances, my opposition to his schemes. I could run, but that would shame Lucian. Better to face justice, even false justice, than prove Ashford right about the Blackthorn line being weak. His hands clenched around the journal. She died protecting our house's honor. She knew it was a trap and walked into it anyway. Alara felt tears sting her eyes. She sounds brave. She sounds like a fool, Lucian said harshly. A noble, self-sacrificing fool who thought honor mattered more than survival. Isn't that what you're doing? Marguerite asked quietly. Walking into Ashford's trap because you think exposing corruption matters more than survival? The silence was damning. That's different, Lucian said finally. Is it? Before he could answer, Clara appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. Mr. Blackthorn, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. Who? He wouldn't give his name. But he's vampire, and he's bleeding. They found the stranger in what remained of the entrance hall, a young vampire, perhaps a century old, with dark skin and a wound in his side that leaked black blood. He collapsed as they approached. Sanctuary, he gasped. Please, I have information about Ashford, but his people are hunting me. Lucian knelt beside him. Who are you? Thomas. I was one of Ashford's clerks. I kept his books, managed his accounts. The young vampire coughed and blood flecked his lips. I couldn't do it anymore. The lies, the murders. When I tried to leave, he sent hunters. Silver? Marguerite asked, examining his wound. Silver and poison. I won't survive the night. What information? Lucian demanded. Catherine. I was there when Ashford arranged her death. He hired a vampire, an old one, powerful enough to enthrall even another vampire. Made Catherine drain that mortal dry without knowing what she was doing. Thomas gripped Lucian's arm. She was innocent. Ashford murdered her through proxy. Rage transformed Lucian's face into something terrible. Names. I need names. The vampire who enthralled her calls himself Dorian. Works for whoever pays most. Currently in Prague, I think. Thomas's breathing grew labored. But Ashford has others. A whole network of killers, thieves, manipulators. He's been building power for centuries, waiting for the right moment to seize control of the entire London Council. Why are you telling us this? Alara asked. Thomas's gaze found her. Because I'm dying anyway. Because some lines shouldn't be crossed, even by monsters. And because, he smiled sadly, because my sister was Emma Whitmore, the mortal Catherine supposedly killed. She deserved better than to be a pawn in Ashford's games. The name from the monument. The victim whose death had condemned Catherine. I'm sorry, Alara whispered. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Just make him pay. Thomas coughed again, weaker now. All the evidence you need is in his estate, in a hidden vault beneath his study. The combination is his turning date November 12, 1492. But you'll have to move fast. He knows I'm gone. He'll destroy everything. We'll need to raid his house before the council meets, Adana said. Tonight. That's suicide, Simon protested. His estate will be guarded by dozens of vampires. Then we bring dozens of our own. Lucian stood, his decision made. Marguerite, gather everyone still loyal to our house. Adana, reach out to the other houses Ashford has wronged. Simon, you're with me. What about me? Alara asked. You stay here, where it's safe. No, she stepped forward, chin raised. I've seen the evidence, heard Thomas's testimony. If something happens to all of you, I'm the only one who can tell the council what we found. If something happens to us, you'll be defenseless. I'm already defenseless. At least let me be useful. She held his gaze. Besides, you'll need someone to work that vault combination. Your hands might be shaking too badly when you find proof of what he did to Catherine. It was a low blow, using his grief as leverage. But Alara had learned from watching Ashford sometimes ruthlessness was necessary. Lucian's jaw tightened. If you come, you follow my orders exactly. No heroics. I saved your life once already. I think I've earned some heroics, despite everything, the danger, the dying vampire at their feet, the impossible raid they were planning. Lucian's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. You're infuriating, I've been told, Thomas coughed, drawing their attention back. One more thing, Ashford knows about the mortal girl. He's obsessed with her testimony, he said. Another cough, weaker. He said if he can't discredit her, he'll turn her, make her vampire, make her testimony inadmissible. She'd be too compromised to speak against him. Ice flooded Alara's veins. Turn me? Against your will, Marguerite said grimly. It's forbidden under the covenant. But clearly Ashford doesn't care about laws that don't serve him. Then we make sure he never gets the chance. Lucian's voice turned hard. We raid his estate, find the evidence, and end this tonight. Thomas died as dawn approached. His last words a whispered prayer for his sister. They burned his body in the old way with respect, with honor, his name added to the monument below. As the vampires prepared for the raid, Lucian pulled Alara aside. If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, promise me you'll run. Don't try to help. Don't try to fight. Just run and don't look back. I can't promise that. Alara, you don't get to save me and then ask me to abandon you. She touched his face, feeling the coolness of his skin, the inhuman perfection that masked something achingly human beneath. We're in this together now, for better or worse. His hand covered hers, pressed it against his cheek. You make me want to survive this. That's dangerous. Good. Be dangerous with me. The kiss happened before either of them decided, desperate, reckless, tasting of blood and ash and promises neither should make. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, the air between them electric. After this is over, Lucian said roughly, we're going to talk about this. After this is over, Alara agreed, if they survived. Chapter 10. Blood Oaths and New Donsishford's estate rose like a monument to Gothic excess, all spires and gargoyles, iron gates and manicured grounds that spoke of centuries of accumulated wealth. Alara crouched behind the garden wall with Lucian, watching vampire guards patrol the perimeter with military precision. 12 visible, Lucian murmured. Probably twice that inside. And we have? Alara whispered. 23. His smile was grim. We'll need to be clever. The attack came in waves. Adana's group struck from the east, drawing guards away. Simon's people breached the servants' entrance. And Lucian, with Alara and Marguerite, slipped through a hidden passage that Thomas had described, a tunnel from the wine cellar that led directly beneath Ashford's study. They emerged into darkness thick with the smell of earth and old stone. Lucien moved with absolute silence, Alara trying to match his steps, while Marguerite guarded their rear. The study above was empty. Ashford was likely coordinating his defense. They found the vault exactly where Thomas said, hidden behind a portrait of some long-dead nobleman. Alara's fingers trembled as she worked the combination. November 12, 1492, 535 years since Ashford's turning. The lock clicked open. Inside were ledgers, contracts, letters, centuries of carefully documented crimes, payment records for assassins, orders for murders disguised as accidents, lists of vampires who deposed him and mysteriously disappeared. And there, in a leather folder, correspondence with Dorian detailing Catherine's enthrallment, the precise dosage needed to make her drain Emma Whitmore completely while believing she'd fed safely. "We have him," Marguerite breathed. Footsteps sounded above. "Company," Lucien said flatly. "Take the evidence and go. I'll hold them." "Not a chance," Alara said. That wasn't a request. The floor above them exploded. Ashford descended through the smoke like an avenging angel, beautiful, terrible, his eyes blazing with centuries of controlled rage, finally unleashed. Behind him came a dozen vampires, all bearing the marks of ancient power. "Did you really think it would be this easy?" Ashford's voice was silk over steel. "That I wouldn't anticipate this crude theft? You left the evidence intact," Lucien said, placing himself between Ashford and Alara. "You wanted us to find it, of course. Because now, when you present it to the council, I'll prove it's all forgeries planted by a desperate vampire trying to avenge his cousin's lawful execution." Ashford's smile was poisonous. "And the mortal witness who conveniently supports your claims? Well, once she's turned, her testimony becomes inadmissible. Transformed vampires are considered too psychologically compromised to testify about their mortal experiences." He moved with blinding speed. Lucien intercepted, and the two vampires collided with a force that shook the room. They were evenly matched, both ancient, both powerful, but Ashford had fed recently while Lucien was still healing from the fire. Marguerite joined the fight, elegant and lethal, but Ashford's supporters surged forward. And suddenly it was chaos, vampires fighting with inhuman speed, the air thick with violence. Alara clutched the evidence to her chest and ran. She made it 3 steps before one of Ashford's vampires caught her, fangs bared. But Simon appeared from nowhere, tackling him aside with a feral snarl. "Go," he shouted. "Get that evidence out." She ran through corridors that blurred together, pursued by footsteps too fast to be human. Found the entrance hall. Saw the front doors. Ashford materialized in front of them. Blood streaked his face, Lucien's, Marguerite's, his own. He looked beautiful and monstrous, a reminder that these creatures were predators wearing human skin. "End of the line, Miss Grey." He advanced slowly, savoring her fear. "You've been remarkably troublesome for someone so fragile. But that ends now. The council will believe what I tell them to believe. I've spent centuries building my influence. You think one mortal's word outweighs that?" He laughed. "Even if you escape tonight, I'll find you. I'll turn you. And then you'll spend eternity knowing you failed." She won't be alone in that eternity. Lucien stood in the doorway behind Ashford, blood-soaked but imbowed. His eyes had changed, reflecting light like mirrors, pupils dilated to black pools. The mask of civilization had fallen away, revealing the predator beneath. "Still breathing, Blackthorn?" Ashford sneered. "How disappointing. I could say the same." They fought again, faster than Alara could follow. She saw flashes, Lucien's hand around Ashford's throat, Ashford's fist in Lucien's chest, both of them moving with lethal grace. Then Adana and the others poured through the entrance, reinforcements turning the tide. Ashford's vampires fell back, outmatched. And suddenly the ancient vampire stood alone. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes," Lucien said quietly. "It is." He produced a silver blade, a ceremonial weapon Alara recognized from her studies, the kind used for formal executions under the Covenant. "You can't," Ashford said, genuine fear, finally cracking his composure. "Only the council can order an execution. I'm not executing you. I'm defending my house and my territory from invasion." Lucien's voice was implacable. "You attacked Blackthorn House. You killed my people. Under Covenant law, I have the right to respond with lethal force. The council will never accept. The council will see the evidence. They'll read Catherine's diary, Thomas's testimony, your own documented crimes, and they'll understand that justice was served." He raised the blade. "This is for Catherine, for Marcus and Teresa, For Emma Whitmore and every other pawn you sacrificed, the blade fell. Ashford's death was silent, absolute. He crumbled to ash in seconds, 5 centuries of existence ending in a whisper. Lucian stood over the remains, his expression unreadable. Then his knees buckled. Alara caught him, or tried to, her mortal strength barely slowing his fall. They collapsed together, and she felt how cold he was, how much the fight had cost him. "You need to feed," she said. "I'll manage. Don't be stubborn." She tilted her head, exposing her throat. "Take what you need." His eyes widened. "Alara, I trust you." And she did, impossibly. "You saved my life. Let me return the favor." His control was remarkable, even weakened. His fangs were gentle against her skin, the bite sharp but brief. She felt the pull, not painful, but intimate beyond anything she'd experienced. A sharing more profound than any physical touch. When he pulled away, his color was better, his wounds already healing faster. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not draining me dry. The night is young." But he smiled, genuine and warm, and she saw the man beneath the monster, the one who'd lost his sister, who'd fought for justice, even when it cost him everything. The council convened 3 nights later. Alara testified, presented evidence, watched ancient vampires argue over laws older than nations. In the end, they ruled Ashford's death justified, his crimes proven beyond doubt. The covenant held. Afterward, standing in the ruins of Blackthorn House as reconstruction began, Lucian found her watching the sunset, one of the few times he could join her. The dying light, soft enough not to burn. "What happens now?" Alara asked. "Now we rebuild. The house, the alliances, the trust that was broken." He stood beside her, careful not to touch. "And we decide what this is between us." "Do we have to decide?" "Eventually. You're mortal. I'm not. That presents complications, like the fact that I'll age and die while you stay frozen." Among other things, Alara turned to face him. "Then let's make a deal. We don't think about eventually. We just have now, this moment, this day, this strange life we've built together. And when eventually comes, we'll face it. That's not very practical." "No, but it's honest." She took his cool hand in her warm one. "I don't know what we are, Lucian, but I know I'm not ready to walk away." "Neither am I." He raised her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles with old-world courtesy. "So we stay together for as long as we can." The sun dipped below the horizon. Night fell across London, and with it came the sound of vampires waking, the household stirring to life. Alara had entered this world fleeing death. Now she walked into darkness willingly, hand in hand with a monster who'd taught her that sometimes the night held more truth than daylight ever could. Behind them, Blackthorn House rose from its ashes, and ahead, an uncertain future waited, dangerous, complicated, and entirely their own. The end.